Hi guys, today I will show you how to make an azure teeth posable Artdoll. As always, I like to start with a sketch of the Artdoll, drawing it to the size I want, here the realistic size of the bird. I do a side view, a front view and a top view. I then put the lines for the armature in different colors, taking care to leave enough space for the quilt batting and the faux fur fabric. This will be my reference for the entire project. I then start building the armature of the Artdoll. I cut 2 pieces of 6 steel wire for the body, measuring the length on my reference. I mark where the pieces meet with a Sharpie and join them with hot glue. I put that piece on the side and continue with the head. The neck is made of a flexible plastic armature, so the head will be posable without wearing out. I take a piece of aluminum foil and form a ball for the head. I then put a hole and glue the flexible plastic armature in it. I cut some groove on the base of the flexible plastic armature so it can fit nicely on the wire of the body. I then use some Apoxie sculpt, a 2-part epoxy putty, which I put on the aluminum foil. I form the general shape of the head, smoothing everything with water. I add a sleeve at the base of the head for the fabric and sculpt the eyes and the beak. Once the Apoxie sculpt is hardened, I refine the shape with an X-Acto knife. I finished with the head for now. I continue with the wings. I measure the length by using my reference and double it. I bend the wire in the middle and start twisting it, using pliers and my fingers. I bend it to shape by using my reference. For the feathers of the wings and the tail, I make a pattern for each size, transfer it on white felt and cut all the pieces. I use my reference again to cut the thin steel wire for the feather, and I assemble everything with Fabri tack, a tacky glue for fabric. I sandwich the wire between the 2 pieces of felt. You can see here the entire set of feathers for the Artdoll. I assemble the tail, twisting the wire and using hot glue so they stay together. I slide the piece on the armature of the body and fix everything with hot glue and Apoxie sculpt. I assemble the wings, gluing the feathers individually and reinforcing everything with epoxy putty. I follow the anatomy of the wing to leave enough space for it to be posable. I take a 6 steel wire for the leg and put Sharpie where I have to bend it. I cut the piece and use 2 pliers to bend it, comparing it to my reference to have the right shape. I cut smaller pieces of thin wire for the toes, glue them on the leg and reinforce the structure with Apoxie sculpt. I assemble the body with hot glue and reinforce it with epoxy putty. I then put the claws on the toes with Apoxie sculpt. To cover the feet, I use grey embroidery thread. I put some Fabri tack glue on the feet and wrap the thread around it, making sure to keep everything tight and to not leave any space. I fill the cavity of the body armature with balls of aluminum foil and hot glue, and I wrap quilt batting around the body. To make sure everything stays in place and remain tight, I wrap a thread around everything. I then make the pattern of the body. I use plastic wrap around the body and cover it with pieces of masking tape. Once I covered the entire body, I mark where I need to cut the pattern and cut it with scissors. I then transfer the pattern onto paper and refine the general shape. I mark the direction of the fur on it so I don't make any mistake. I mark the direction of the fur on the faux fur fabric and transfer the pattern on it. I cut it, going slowly to make sure I only cut the fabric and not the fur. I then sew the pieces together, but only one side, so I can slide the fabric onto the body of the bird and sew it tightly using the ladder stitch. I sew the tail, making sure I take every feather. I use Fabri tack to glue the faux fur fabric onto the epoxy head. I use a hair clipper and trim the fur to the size I want and finish with scissors. I make a pattern of the top part of the wing and cut 4 pieces of quilt batting and faux fur fabric. I sew only one side of the wing, put it in place and sew everything shut, making sure to take every feather. I use some scrap faux fur fabric and cut triangles which I sew on the top of the legs. I finish by using the hair clipper and cutting the fur to the right length. I then use Valejo Surface Primer on the eyes, beak and claws, so the paint sticks better on it. I paint the eyes black, the beak and the claws grey. I put some highlight on the beak and the claws. I finish the details with 2 coats of varnish. The first one is a gloss varnish, Varathane Diamond Wood Finish Gloss. The second one depends on the detail. Gloss varnish for the eyes and a satin varnish for the beak and claws. I continue by furring the face. I cut the fur on the faux fur fabric and divide it in small clumps. I then put Fabri tack on the head and apply the fur with tweezers and my fingers. I always begin on the outside because it's easier and the transition to the fabric is seamless. I finish the face by cutting the fur to the right length with scissors. For coloring the fur, I use an airbrush and golden acrylic fluid, which I sand down with a high flow medium. I use white on the end of the feathers and the underside, and different blues on the body, using references to make it more realistic. I make sure to brush the fur regularly, so it doesn't clump together. I finish with a brush, correcting some edges and painting the lines around the eyes black. The azure teeth Artdoll is now finished. I hope you enjoyed this video and I will see you for the next project. Bye bye!